If you've never watched a city breathe, come to the waterfront at 4 a.m. The cranes sleep with their necks bent, the tide lifts the dock ropes like a patient hand, and the fog lies to every light. I worked those hours harbor pilot, guiding ships from open water into the narrow throat of our port. You learn to read things other people call luck, current, inertia, the way a hull carries its history. You put hundreds of thousands of tons exactly where they need to be and then go home to make coffee like it's an equal miracle. My name is Daniel. I'm 39. My wife is Lena. She runs a flower studio 3 blocks from the ferry pier, the kind of place with handwritten labels and peonies that look like saints. She makes arrangements that teach you the phrase, deliberate wild, and convinces old men to buy tulips in January because she says a house needs a throat to sing through. We met 10 years ago when a storm trapped the ferry and the whole city decided to be romantic. She'd come to the pier with a bucket of leftover freesias to rescue from tomorrow, the way she put it. My jacket smelled like diesel and sleep. She tucked a stem into my breast pocket and said, "You look like a man who forgets good things are happening while he's busy preventing bad ones." I pretended not to be a person who would think about one sentence for a decade. We were good, not storybook. I worked nights, she worked dawn. We passed like trains that wave. We did small holy things, her hand on my back as I pretended to rest before the next tide, my palm on her ankle under the quilt when a siren convinced her the city was breaking in. We wanted a child and almost had one and then didn't. People brought food we couldn't eat. For a while, our apartment learned to hold its breath. Then, like all rooms, it exhaled and we kept going. If I had to point to a beginning, I'd lie and say I couldn't. The honest answer is a smell and a bruise and a door that clicked like it was closing on a second room I couldn't see. The smell came first, smoke on a jacket that didn't belong to our life, not cigarettes. Cedar smoke from a wood stove, the kind of scent you wear home from a weekend where you think the world won't find you. It clung to the inside of Lena's scarf in January. "We tested a holiday installation," she said, not meeting my eyes. "An event space outside the city." She laughed, bright but fatigued. "Pinterest will bankrupt us." I kissed the scarf like men kiss evidence when they want it to be a scarf. The bruise came in February. Small, perfectly round, low on her thigh when we were getting dressed in the blue light you use to pretend daytime hasn't arrived. It had the deliberate look of a mouth that isn't yours. She pulled her tights up fast, smiling in that way a person smiles when they've decided what your reaction will be and find comfort in their decision. We did not talk about it. We went to my mother's for lunch and discussed the merits of limes versus lemons like a family that trusts fruit. The door came in March. An actual door, 2, in fact. We rent a small place above a bakery. The bakery's back hallway shares a landing with our fire stairs. Our superintendent installed a second deadbolt on our apartment door after a break-in on the next block. It's industrial and loud and honest lock. When Lena came home late that night from an event, I woke to the sound of 2 doors closing, the heavy public hallway door and then our apartment. But there was a third sound, quieter, interior. A door I didn't know. It clicked the way cheap bedroom doors in weekend cabins click when someone pretends this is privacy. Half asleep, I told myself it was the bathroom. In the morning, I checked the bathroom door. I opened and closed it with gentleness and force, as if I could match the memory in my ears to the physics of the hinge. It wasn't the same sound. I didn't say anything. I afraid of ghosts my way through an explanation. I love the kind of work where physics ends arguments. Marriage is not that kind of work. April arrived, and the harbor got busy the way insects get busy when the temperature twitches. I watched container ships slip beneath bridges that looked too small to forgive them. I slept in pieces and learned to cook pasta in a way that made us feel like a couple who read our own recipes. We weren't trying, and we were trying, and both felt like lying. One morning, after a run of 3 ships, I walked to the studio to carry Lena's buckets because her wrists were tired, and I like the way she says "my hero" when I do something that anyone with good knees could do. The front door was locked with the sign flipped to. Back in 20, we're cutting stems. I used the side alley that honeycombs our city and tried the back gate. It was unlatched. Inside, the cool room hummed. The other room, the one we built from privacy screens and charm to make consultations feel like a secret, was shut. Light under the bottom seam. I heard that click again, cheap, faux satisfying. I put a hand on the sill and stayed still. Lena's laugh is a geography. She has 3 laughs. The bright one for customers, the soft one for me, the quiet one for babies and plants. The one I heard in that moment was none of the 3. It was a caught breath released. It was nostalgia happening in a present tense. It bent my ribs. Before I could move, the alley gates scraped. A man stepped inside carrying a brown paper bag with 2 coffees. He was my age, maybe a slack week younger. He had the sturdy hands of someone who knows how to lift something living without making it know it was lifted. He wore a faded ball cap with salt marks. He saw me and performed the posture of politeness. "Hey," he said. "We're closed until Sorry, thought you were..." His eyes adjusted and did the recognition thing people do when they've heard your name without being introduced. "You must be Daniel." Sometimes out on the water, we arrive at this precise angle. 2 vessels committed to a path that will end in a curve or a crash, and the math can still go either way. "I must be," I said. The cheap door opened. Lena stepped out, cheeks pink with work, wrist wet from a sink. Relief shot through her face so fast, it left a sadness behind it. "Alex," she said to the man with the bag. "This is Daniel." He extended his hand with the reflex of a man not ashamed and not yet asked to be. His palm was warm and smelled faintly like cedar. "Alex helps with installs," Lena said into the triangle of air between us, into the gap where a story belongs. "Long-time customer, short-term savior." "Woodworker," he offered, like he was issuing a resume to the police. "Repair, builds, some event design. I do the hanging frames for her wild chandeliers." He smiled at Lena. It held history, and it didn't apologize for holding it. I shook his hand, because I am not a man who rejects the rituals that keep us from tearing each other open. "Nice to meet you," I said to the lie and the truth. The coffees were for me and him. Lena did a small, invisible calculus and added a 3rd with milk from the back. We stood in the cool room and made weather small talk because people refuse to be animals, even when the forest in them is on fire. Alex said he had to pick up wood from a place up north and left with the promise of tomorrow. The paper bag smelled like a cabin. When he was gone, Lena set the coffees down and placed her hands on the table the way people do before delivering a verdict. "Don't ask me a question you want to hate me for," she said. The sentence made my stomach turn to glass. "Is there a version," I asked, "where I don't?" "Maybe," she said, "but not today." The thing about being trained to guide something enormous through a narrow place is that you either freeze or you move exactly as slowly as you need to. I moved slow. "How long?" I asked. "Since January," she said. She didn't cry. She didn't reach for me. She held the truth like you hold something sleeping that might bite. It wasn't supposed to be anything. Then it was something. Then it was a problem. "And now?" "Now it's a truth," she said. "And a problem." She laughed once, and it sounded like the lock did. "Is it him?" I asked, because my brain is a list, and lists demand nouns. "It is of him," she said softly, irritating me with the poet in her. "And it is of the part of me that didn't know how to live in the room where we lost the baby. He made another room and I didn't ask what it cost to walk into it." "I would have paid," I said, and it came out small. I know, she said. You always pay for. I needed someone who paid with. There are sentences that end arrangements. I won't beg, I said, and I meant it as pride, not threat. She flinched like I'd thrown a small rock. We decided like adults who don't want to be the worst versions of themselves to pause. She asked me for 3 days to untangle. I told her 3 days was a mercy and a cruelty, and she nodded like she knew both were true. I left the studio and went down to the pier and watched a tugboat nose a ship twice its size into obedience. The tug wore a name that made me want to call my father and say something I should have said when he could still hear it. At home, I wrote an email to our therapist with the subject, "We screwed up," and then changed it to, "We need help," because I didn't want the first sentence she read to be a verdict, too. I didn't sleep that night or the next. I guided a tanker in pea soup fog and felt briefly noble and then foolish. I did not tell my mother because she would make it all about God and the unborn. I did not tell my brother because he would make it all about me and beer. I told no one, and the telling was a silence with weight. On the second night of the pause, the wind swung north and the city's lights sharpened. I walked home past the bakery and saw our fire stair door ajar, Brick holding it open. Our apartment was dark except for the bathroom, one of those cheap rental bulbs, trying to be honest. I climbed the steps quietly because I didn't want to interrupt what might end. On the landing, I heard Lena's voice, soft, intent, present, and a man's voice answering in the register of people who know their bodies are not allowed to be loud here. There was the sound of water, a bottle, not the faucet. There was that click. I stood with my hand on the wall and felt the building's history come through my palm. Every couple who had ever done something irreversible and then slept badly. I stepped back down 2 stairs because I didn't want to see. I didn't want the story in my head to have a photograph. I went to the harbor and sat on a bollard and watched the tide pull the moon through the water like a necklace. I cried until my face hurt, and then the crying stopped like anybody else's power. On the 3rd day, she came to the pier and sat with me on the low wall, where fishermen say the most sensible things in the least hopeful ways. I told him it was over, she said, voice sanded down. It isn't his fault. It isn't yours. It is mine. She paused. And it is yours. I waited for the list of my failures. She didn't give me a list. You left the room after we lost the baby, she said quietly. Not physically. You stayed so hard you disappeared. I thought I was the floor, I said. I thought you needed the floor. I did, she said. And then I needed a window. She wrapped her arms around herself, the way you do when your ribs remember you own them. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to tell me if you want to try not to be this version of ourselves anymore. I don't know what trying looks like, I said, and for once not knowing felt like a virtue. We set rules. We would see the therapist twice a week for a month. No more lies. No more rooms I didn't know about. No contact with him. She promised. She cried then. I held her and hated that I still loved the way her breath changed when she let her face be a child on my shirt. I believed her. You will want to tell me I was foolish. You will be half right. 2 weeks later, the city's festival season began, the one where every Thursday night is a parade of people pretending they didn't live here yesterday. The studio had a booth under strings of lights, and Lena stood there like a woman who invented veils. I watched from across the street because I wanted to see the way the world sees her. People bought flowers they didn't need and said, "For my wife," like it was a spell. Across the crowd, I saw him. Alex. Not at her booth. At the end of the block, near the beer truck, hat low, face set to, "You could confuse me for anyone if you're not looking." He didn't approach. He watched the way I was watching. At one point, a child let go of a balloon and it shot into the dark. People made that sympathetic noise crowds make for losses that are cute. He looked up, followed the line of it, smiled the saddest smile I've ever seen on a man uninjured. I left before my feet made a mistake. At therapy, we did the careful work. "You two make rituals out of competence," our therapist said, both impressed and weary. "Try making rituals out of vulnerability." We attempted. We talked with our hands empty. We had sex like two people who had read about it and were brave enough to admit we were bad at it when the stakes felt like rent. We ate soup. We paused mid-argument to breathe in each other's noses like dogs. We started to forget what the cheap door sounded like when it closed. 2 months later, the port took delivery of a sculpture, a house-sized thing made of rusted anchors and driftwood, welded into a shape like a god that wasn't gentle. The city paid too much, and people hated it publicly and loved it in private. I piloted the barge that carried it from the far pier to the museum landing. A news crew filmed my back like it was a protagonist. That night, Lena poured wine on our roof and said, "You looked like you were deciding if a myth could swim." And I felt briefly simple. A husband being teased by his wife. At midnight, her phone buzzed on the table. A name lit the screen that wasn't saved, just a number, and yet my chest recognized it like a bruise recognizes a doorway. "You don't get to be the only brave one. I need 5 minutes. Backstairs." No name, no punctuation, but bravery is a signature. Lena lifted the phone, thumb hovering over reply. She turned it toward me and I read the message twice, because engineers don't believe in once. She pressed the power button and set the phone face down. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. We lay side by side and pretended sleep. At 12:17 a.m., the back stair door clicked, the heavy hallway door, then the soft, cheap interior one below us. Not our apartment. The bakery storeroom. The building breathed. Footsteps climbed, halted 2 floors down, descended. A person waited, and a person did not come, and a person left. In the morning, there was a freesia stem tucked into our doormat, bruised at the neck like it had been held too hard. I picked it up and carried it inside like evidence and tossed it into the sink, then hated myself for acting like a courthouse. Lena watched me from the doorway with her arms crossed in the posture she uses when she is holding herself together so I don't have to. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have blocked him." "Your apology is damage control," I said, the worst version of me finding his lecture notes. "I need a different noun." She flinched. "What noun?" "Grief," I said. Then, because I wasn't done humiliating myself, I added, "and choice." There is a thing about men like me when we are wounded. We either become priests or cops. I became both. I changed the code on the back stair. I pretended I did it for the building. I rotated my logs again, physics, comfort. I told myself that putting the ocean where it needed to be made me qualified to arrange human water. It does not. 2 weeks later, a late storm rolled in with the swagger of seasons that already said goodbye and returned because they forgot their keys. Rain hammered the port, and the river thought about changing its name. I guided a tanker through chop and felt alive the way terror can make you feel young. When I got home, Lena was packing a milk crate with vases. "Deliveries," she said. "The museum wants those tulip clouds for the gala." "I'll carry," I offered, because carrying is a morality in my home. "I'm fine," she said, and did not mean fine. She meant, I need to prove I can lift the part of this that belongs to me. We kissed like people who remember what they used to be fluent in and are trying not to be embarrassed by their accent. That night I went back out, double shift, a freighter at 2 a.m. The fog came down like diminished applause. On the way to the pilot station, I passed a motel I'd never noticed, the kind that wears its vacancy sign like a tired necklace. Glass Harbor Inn. 27 doors, 2 floors, rooms opening to rain. In one, a light was on behind a drawn curtain. A figure sat on the edge of the bed the way people sit in paintings when they've been painted by someone who loves their loneliness. It could have been any 2 shadows. It could have been no one. At 4 a.m., the freighter's captain told me about his daughter in Manila and the way she wants to be a nurse because she loves the idea of people becoming less alone in rooms with machines. He showed me her photo gut-punched into a phone case. She looked like a promise. We slid under the bridge and the city pretended to be mine again. I went home. I slept. At 9, my friend Amelie from the museum texted, "Your woman is a miracle worker. The gala looks like weather we deserve." I sent back a heart I didn't feel. At noon, Lena sent me a picture, 2 tulip clouds floating in the museum's atrium like soft decisions. The caption said, "We did it," and the "we" made me feel like a chair falling half an inch. At 2, I got a second text, but not from her. From a number I didn't know. A photo of a door, one of the motel doors at the Glass Harbor, room 214. Under it, a freesia, bruised. If you want to be a hero, come stop something. If you want to be a man, don't. Again, no name, just accuracy. I drove. I wish I could say I called a friend or a therapist or God. I drove because I know how to aim large things at narrow places and believe they will not kill what they pass. The Glass Harbor Inn smelled like cereal and regret. I knocked on 2 La 14 with 2 knuckles because my father taught me that the third sounds like the police. Lena opened the door slowly, like she'd practiced it in a mirror. She was still wearing her work dress, the black one with sleeves like a refusal. Her hair was up, the way she pins it when she wants to be able to breathe. Behind her, Alex stood near the bed, hands in his pockets like an apology. The room was careful 2 chairs, a bedspread that had seen 100 lives and none they would put on a brochure. Lena looked at me without flinching. She looked like a woman who had decided to be a person who doesn't pity herself. "I asked you not to come," she said. "You didn't ask," I said, holding up the phone. "He did." Alex didn't step forward. He didn't speak. He removed his hat like a man walking into a sanctuary he doesn't believe in and wanted not to be rude. "What is this?" I asked. "I meant wedding, wake, circus." Lena breathed. "Goodbye," she said. "Properly. We tried to end it with text messages and grief and grocery lists. It keeps not staying ended." "You could have ended it by not being in a motel," I said. The line was ugly and it felt good for half a second and then lifeless. She nodded, accepting the bad sentence like a weather report. "Say what you came to say," she offered. It was kind, which was almost worse. "Marry him," I said, and it surprised me because I had not told my mouth to use those exact materials. Alex winced like I had thrown a tool badly. "Or leave," I added softer. "Pick a door and use it. Stop building rooms inside rooms." Alex finally spoke. His voice was what you think. Solid, unremarkable, honest enough to dislike. "I didn't ask him to come," he said. "I asked him not to have to imagine it." "That isn't better," I said. "It is to me," he replied. "Imagining kills slower." Lena sat on the edge of the bed the way shadows do. She put her face in her hands, and for a second I saw the day 10 years ago on the pier when she tucked a stem into a stranger's coat. "I love you," she said to me. "I loved you before I knew what it cost to be loved by someone who refuses to drift." "I love him," she said, and the him made the room tilt. "In a way that makes me a person I remember wanting to be. I hate that both are true. I cannot keep being 2 people." I didn't say, "You already are 2 people," though my chest put the words on a sign and waved them. Outside, a truck grumbled by and the curtain breathed with it. Somewhere, a TV made sport noises. The world was doing the disrespectful thing of continuing. I did the only noble thing I had left that didn't feel like theater. I turned to Alex. "Do you know the day she lost the baby?" I asked. He shook his head, pain landing on his face like a man who's taking a hit he believes he deserves. I told him the date. I told him the indefensible detail about the way the ER smelled like mint and pennies, and we both thought that meant something, and it didn't. I told him the way Lena's back looked, not like a metaphor, like a back. I told him because if he was going to hold her, he needed to hold the right woman, not the one that made him feel like a weekend. He listened. It made me hate him less and myself more. "Okay," he said when I was done. "Thank you." I turned to Lena. "I won't be your parent," I said, "or your priest, or your tide. I will be your memory. Do not make me your alibi." My body surprised me a second time. "Choose." She did. She chose to come home with me. It wasn't a triumph, it was a walk. We moved through the motel lot like people at the end of a bad play that had one good scene and they're arguing about which it was. In the car, we didn't touch. At home, she cried in the shower, and I sat on the floor and cried into a towel because water is a disguise and I am not above it. The next day, she sent Alex a message that was the opposite of poetry. We showed it to each other and to the therapist. We said, we are not characters. We made new rituals. We paid for honesty with boredom. We learned to leave rooms rather than throwing them away. We made fresh hummus that was somehow worse than store-bought and pretended this was an analogy. We did not make babies. We let the idea of babies be a room that existed in our building but didn't have our name on the buzzer. Months passed. The port learned my name in a way that meant they trusted me with the ships that never forgive mistakes. Lena's studio grew a second bench and a student from the community college who said delicious about colors. We slept with our feet touching like people who remembered a language faster than they could speak it. One afternoon in late autumn, a squall hit the harbor and I guided a car carrier in sideways in a way that made the tug crews clap sarcastically on the radio. I felt good at my work and then vaguely ashamed of feeling good at something that wasn't my marriage. I went home to the smell of baking bread and the sound of a song we used to argue about. There was a freesia on the counter hole, unbruised. "From who?" I asked, trying for gentle and landing on interrogative. "Me," Lena said, a little laugh in her throat. "I wanted the house to forgive a smell." We lasted another year. A good year, by some metrics. Sometimes that's the worst thing. We lasted until the night I woke at 4 a.m. and heard the cheap interior door click inside me again. Memory, not sound. We lasted until I realized I could love a person and also love the version of them that would always need a different room. We lasted until I understood that my nobility had become a structure I lived in because it looked like me. When we separated, we did it the way we had done everything at the end, with competence. She took the studio. I kept the apartment because the bakery stairs felt like a limb. We divided books by whether the person left behind would read them or pretend to. We told our mothers in a sentence built like a ramp. We hugged like people who had carried each other in a storm and now saw land and didn't want to pay the tax at the border. She moved to a place with windows on two sides. I painted a wall a color with a name so earnest it almost apologized. I see Alex sometimes. Our city is small. Once he was loading wood into a van in the rain and looked up and saw me and nodded with the exact respect a man nods to the man who didn't hit him when he could have. Once I walked past the studio and saw him in the back, standing on a ladder, hanging a frame for a chandelier of wild eucalyptus that smelled like somebody's grandmother's good secrets. He did not see me. I didn't pretend that meant anything other than weather. People want tight endings. They want justice like a ship in a channel, straight, true, arrival horn. What I have is a foghorn in the dark. It tells you two things at once. I'm here. And I can't see you. You answer with your own horn, and if you're both lucky, the math holds and you pass. Lena mailed me a box last month. Inside, a small book of photos I'd taken over the years without meaning to make a thing. Ropes, knots, hulls, the way water looks when it decides to be glass. On the title page, she wrote, "For the man who knows how to put enormous things exactly where they belong. No apology, no petition, The respect hurt more than any sorry she could give. I don't know if this is a confession or a map. I know I was betrayed physically by a person who also kept me alive on days when the tide lied to me. I know I stayed noble, and I know I stayed too long, and I know those are both me. I know the smell of cedar smoke can be both a warning and a nostalgia you choose to invite. I know some doors are cheap and some doors are heavy and some doors are not doors at all, but the sound your own ribs make when you remember you have them. If you need a rule, don't be two people. If you are, don't ask the person who loves you to be both of your rooms. This morning, before the sun earned the right to be called that, I guided a ship into the signature of our city. The fog lifted exactly at the right moment because sometimes the world does theater to be kind. The captain asked me how I read a river like that. Practice, I said, and forgiveness. He laughed and wrote something in his log that I'll never see. I walked home through the market and bought freesias from a stall that still believes flowers make the day decide to be better. I put them in a glass we used to fight over because I like to drink water out of vases. The apartment smelled like a room with one door and a man who knows how to use it. That's my confession. I didn't stop the worst thing from happening. I didn't fix it when it did. I climbed into the boat I was given and guided it until the water asked me to get out. I did. I stood on the pier and watched my life pass and didn't jump after it. I think that counts as brave. And if someday I hear that cheap click again, I will hope it's only the wind playing at modesty with a door that's already closed. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you. It means a lot. New stories like this one are posted every single day, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss one. And if this story touched you, please give it a like. It really helps more people find our content.